Hey, Faith family, I hope you guys are doing well. So glad to be back with you guys as we continue in our current series, Greater Love. This week, we'll be looking at the crucifixion of Jesus. The Gospel of Matthew spends a lot of time looking at the events before and after the crucifixion. And as we come into the reading this week, we see that Jesus was already endured a horrible whipping with chains and leather straps. We know that normally the Romans would make the convicted criminals carry their own cross to further the punishment, but Jesus was so weakened by the scourging that he had endured that he couldn't even carry the crossbeam. So they forced a man named Simon to carry the cross with him. They led Jesus outside of the city gates to a place called Golgotha, which means literally the place of the skull. And scholars don't know exactly where Golgotha is located today, but there's several spots in modern-day Jerusalem thought to be Golgotha, which is okay because the location of the place is not nearly important as what happens there. So as the Roman soldiers went about the methodical business of crucifying Jesus and the other thieves that were with him that day, they had offered him wine mixed with gall. And scholars argue over the exact meaning of gall. Could have been a sedative meant to ease his pain. Could have been a poison meant to kill him even faster. But either way, Jesus refused the drink because he had made the choice to suffer for the sins of all mankind. So Jesus is hung on the cross, but we know that his horrible punishment is not over yet. He would have to suffer much more in order to fulfill the prophecy of Isaiah. As with so much of Jesus' life and ministry, this moment was prophesied in Isaiah 53. It says, "He was pierced because of our rebellion, crushed because of our iniquities. Punishment for our peace was on him, and we are healed by his wounds." The Roman soldiers, either ignorant of who they were killing or desensitized to the violence, were playing games at the foot of the cross to see who would take home Jesus' belongings, including his robes. Again, whether they knew it or not, these soldiers were accomplishing the prophecy of Psalm 22, which says, "They divided my garments among themselves, and they cast lots for my clothing." Finally, the soldiers were stationed there to guard his body from being tampered with or taken by his followers. While there, they indicated what his charge was. They put a sign above his head that said, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." We also know that Jesus was crucified with two other men who were criminals. Even as Jesus, innocent of all charges, hung between two criminals, people came by to hurl insults at him. Even in his dying moments, Jesus continued to suffer unjust treatment. As the people mocked him about raising up the temple in 3 days, little did they know that he was actually prophesying about raising up his own body, which is the temple. The Jewish leaders said that if he trusted in God, that God would rescue him from the cross, and little did they know that it was only because of his intimate trust in God the Father that he was willing to be obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Jesus was insulted and mocked as one who couldn't save himself, much less others. However, we know that this was all part of God's plan. Jesus would later save himself, and he would rise up from the dead, and he would be elevated to great glory, the likes of which no human being will ever experience, because he is, in fact, God the Son, worthy of all glory and honor and power. But before the glory would come the suffering. It's in this moment that Jesus is humiliated, crucified, and insulted. We have to know that the crucifixion of Jesus was absolutely necessary. Jesus had to be humiliated and insulted in order that we might experience salvation. If we were going to be saved, then Jesus would have to suffer. Now, the reality is that Jesus chose this path. No one forced Jesus to be crucified. The Bible makes it clear that if Jesus didn't want to be on that cross, then nothing in this world could have kept him there. Jesus himself reminded the disciples in Matthew chapter 26 when he said, "Put your sword back into its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then should the scriptures be fulfilled that it must be so?" Jesus didn't have to stay on the cross. He had the power to get off. And Robert Mounce beautifully put it this way: it was the power of love, not nails, that kept him there. It was because of faithfulness that Jesus endured humiliation. It was out of obedience to the Father that Jesus would suffer the insults of man. It was because of love that Jesus laid down his life. Jesus' sacrifice made our salvation possible. This awful crucifixion made the amazing gift of salvation possible. So what a tragedy that we don't share this amazing gift with others like we should. So what about you? Will you share the story of salvation with others who need to hear it? Will you share his willful suffering so that others might be made right with God? Have you been made right with God? Are you living as one who has been changed by the great love and sacrifice of Jesus? What steps might we take to live differently this week after hearing the Word of God? Even though the act of crucifying Jesus was evil, the crucifixion was still the plan of God to make atonement for sin.